Hey, real quick, you know what I noticed? Ever since Trump got in office and everything, right? And the whole DEI repeal, I've noticed that the transgender wrestlers, specifically Gisele Shaw of TNA at the time, and Nyla Rose of AEW at the time, during the Biden administration, they haven't been on TV throughout the whole year. I think they got fired due to the DEI shit. And, I can't help but just applaud that. You know what I'm saying? Because I remember last year, when Mercedes Moné got in and I had to skip some of her matches because she would contest with Nyla Rose. And, I don't support transgenders getting into matches in women's wrestling. I do not support that shit. They need to have their own division if they want to compete. They shouldn't compete with either males or with females. They should have their own division if they want to compete. And, I don't think that Nyla Rose or Gisele Shaw were the only ones, the only gender benders in the women's locker room, but they definitely were the most prominent. I could even remember, like, in early 2020s, go to any department store, Target, Walmart, whatever, they would have Nyla Rose action figures. And, when I found out that Gisele Shaw was a dude, it just sounded like absolute ludicrous, because I was like, hold up, this person got into wrestling saying they didn't want to be a stereotype of Filipinos, yet you're a ladyboy, which is the biggest stereotype of Filipinos. That, oh, you sleep with one of these Filipinos and it's going to be a chick with a dick, So it's like, huh? Like, how? You're a walking stereotype, but you say you don't want to exemplify stereotypes for your wrestling character. It was just absolute ludicrous. And I'm glad to see that they're gone. It's going on, half of the year is almost up, and I haven't seen them on TNA. I haven't seen them on AEW. It's mostly just been, and from what I've seen, it's been, cisgender women, and yeah, that's what pro wrestling should be. It should keep it that way. You know what I mean? Cisgender women competing in women's combat sports. I don't know if I could say the same thing about MMA, because I don't really pay attention to the MMA scene that much. Unless if, unless if it's on, you know what I mean? Or women's boxing, for that matter. You know what I'm saying? I don't really pay attention to those forms of women's combat sports. But if it's on and if I get wind of it, I do check it out. But definitely with women's pro wrestling, I have noticed, the change of transgenders, the most prominent transgenders, such as Nyla Rose and Gisele Shaw, being given the boot this year during the Trump administration. And I gotta say, I think that's dope. I think this is one of the best things that the DEI repeal has done, because, DEI in general, I never benefited from it. And yeah, it definitely was something that was more for, Caucasian females and homosexuals to, continue to get money and, be put into top positions in different corporations, not limited to, large wrestling promotions, large pro wrestling promotions. So I'm glad to see that change. I'm glad to see that shift. And, if Nyla Rose and Gisele Shaw wants to, get out the indies, if they return back to the indies, if they're still doing that, you know what I'm saying? I'm not checking for them. But, hell, maybe they should get together and, start up a tranny pro wrestling promotion. You know what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure there's an audience for that. You know what I mean? I know they got cross dressers like Super Oprah and stuff like that. I'm not into, I don't support cross-dressing wrestlers either, but I know that there is a fucking, market for that shit. So maybe, all of them should just get together and create their own fucking, wrestling promotion that I'm not going to watch or commentate on. But I'm glad to see them off of TNA and off of AEW for, cisgender women to continue to compete, and I don't gotta like, really, you know, question while I'm enjoying women's combat sports, and question if the people that I'm watching, perform are actually women. So, you know, just something that I noticed, just something that I observed out here in the streets.